Okay, so what I'll be doing today is I'll be doing a second how-to video on how to panel line a aircraft kit. This is a Tamiya 1/44 MiG-29 being painted, a bit of weathering on the surface of the model. Now all I'm going to be doing with this is I'm going to be doing an enamel panel wash on it. Okay, so that's that. So the things you will need for this is a gloss varnish of your choice. I prefer to use Enamel clear. It's like water, goes on very nicely and smooth, sets quite quickly as well. Ideal for this sort of thing because I run it straight out of my airbrush, which is currently cleaning in the other room at the moment. You will also need a pot of enamel paint of your choice, preferably matte. This is metal coat. I picked the wrong bottle up, but never mind. Got the same colour lid. So you'll need a matte enamel paint. I use Enamel because it's easy for me to get hold of, with it being a UK company. You could use Tamiya, Revel, Testers, lots of other companies make enamel paints. You will also need a bottle of Turps. I use Wilco's Turps for cleaning your brushes. And you will also need a enamel thinners as well, which I've neglected to bring through with me to thin the enamel, which I'll go grab in a minute. And, oops, sorry about that, I just knocked my panels. A couple of pots, one to put the enamel wash in, one to put the thinners in to clean out our brushes, which we'll be using a thin. This is a 00 brush that I tend to save specifically for this job, and a slightly thicker brush which we'll be using to mix the thinners up with. You could use a stick or whatever you want. Okay, so I will just go, oh there it is, there's my slightly thicker brush for doing the things. We'll also be using some cotton wool buds to clean off the enamel pin wash when we're done. Be back in a minute. I'm just going to go collect the rest of my materials and we'll make a start. Okay, first things first, I'll be using my cheap airbrush. This is what, well, by cheap it was about £50, but anyone who's getting an airbrush, I would strongly suggest buying a quick release, so you don't wear the threads out, because the threads on the airbrush tend to be made out of either aluminium, or the hoses tend to be made out of low grade steel, unless you buy very expensive ones. But for the purpose of cleaning or whatever, for the price of one of these, they're only about a couple of pounds or a couple of dollars. But all you have to do when you're finished is just pull that down. It turns the airflow off, chuck it in to ultrasonic cleaner or however you clean your airbrush. When you're ready, push it back together, you're all done. Okay, so that's just a quick one on airbrushing. So what we're going to do first is we are going to get our model and we are going to airbrush on some gloss varnish. Either gloss or satin works well for this, but when it's finished we're going to give it a matte coat anyway, just to take off the shine. Doesn't work with matte varnish, because the way matte varnish works is it basically roughs up the surface of the model, which is why it makes it matte, where gloss, it actually helps the enamel just flow into all of the panel lines and accent them only, and then when it comes to cleaning up, it's a doddle really. So I'm going to stop recording while I do my airbrushing because my compressor is reasonably loud. With this Enamel clear you need to have your PSI set really low, around about 10 to 12 PSI. It's just like airbrushing water, and you don't want it too fast, otherwise too high, otherwise the varnish will just spray all over the surface and pull up, and you don't want that to happen. The good thing is with this model airbrush I've got, this little thing at the bottom here actually is like a choke. So what it does is it restricts the amount of air coming out of the airbrush, so you can get, like, you might have it set at 10 psi, but it increases the paint to air mix. So basically you're getting a very fine mist effect coming out of the airbrush. So if you just bear with me a second, I will get this thing gloss varnished up and I'll show you when it's finished. Okay, our MiG-29 is just drying, so now we're going to crack on with making our enamel pin wash for our model. So what we're going to do first is we're going to get a little bit of Turps and pour it into one container. We're going to need a little bit, not a lot, but that much is okay. This stuff really stinks. You can get odourless, but it's very expensive. Okay, so what we need next is we need to... Okay, so next we need to just crack open our enamel paint. This is just a end off a soldering iron that's knackered. Just crack that open. It's reasonably shook up. Okay, so what we need to do is we take our toothpick. You could use, actually I think I might just use a brush because it's quite caked on. There it is. So what we're going to do is we take a little bit of enamel. Only a little bit, you only need probably about that much, should be able to do the entire model. Okay, so once we've got that, we then just rinse our brush out in the Turps. You can use Turps for this, but I found it is slightly better to use enamel thinners because, after all, that's what it's designed to do. Oh, I just broke my brush. Okay. So next we take our Humbrol enamel thinners. Damn child locks. Okay. Take our pipette. And we need approximately about 4 to 5 parts enamel thinners to the paint. So what we can do is we just stir it up with a brush we just used to mix this up. So the consistency we want is when we put it against the side of the pot, it should flow very well. I think that might just need a little bit more paint in there, just a little bit, not much. Just grab a little bit more paint. What have I done with my paint? There you are. Just the tiniest bit more paint. It's just a bit too thin. Possibly one more part paint should do this perfectly. Have a look. That's spot on now. Okay, so once this is mixed, just rinse out our brush in our Turps. We'll put all our lids on stuff so we don't have an accident like I had last time when I did the weathering one and threw water everywhere, which wasn't pleasant. Okay, so we'll just put the lid down on this. Get that out of the way. Sure it's on tight, and we'll get our Turps one out of the way. And we'll just check to see how dry our aeroplane is. It's still a little bit wet. I'm just going to pause the video here and I will be back in around about 10 minutes. This should be fully dry. Don't worry about the enamel thinners, it will not dry in that time. The enamel pin wash usually takes about an hour or so to dry. If it does dry out, just add some more enamel thinners, it'll remix it up and you don't have to worry about it sticking. Okay, so I'll just leave it there for now and I will be back in say 10 minutes. Okay, now our varnish is dry. What we can do is we'll take a little bit of our enamel mix and bear with me just a second, and then what we're going to do is we are going to just put it down into the main areas of the panel lines. We don't have to be incredibly neat with this because we put the gloss varnish on top. If you can see, the actual varnish is just using capillary action to get into all of these crevices. Just need to take some of that off there. I've got a little bit too much on it. Okay, so what we do is we just get a little bit on there to certain areas, like should have really done this on a new miniature. I've had this one on display for a while. I thought I got most of the dust off it, but I obviously didn't get enough off, or the gloss varnish I didn't put enough on. Either which way, but you kind of get the point. Every time I pop a little blob on of this enamel mix, it then flows with a capillary action through all of the panel lining. Don't worry about it too much. It might look a bit messy now, but when this is dry, I can then go over it with some enamel thinners on a cotton wool bud, and it will then just clean all of this off. So we'll just put a little blob right there, and as you can see, it's flowing around the edges of the panel lines down there. It's literally going everywhere where there's a panel line. Just a little bit behind the cockpit there. Very good for doing things like even war games figures like tanks and things. It's more forgiving than an acrylic wash, and you don't get the problems of tide marks on your models, which I know certain acrylic varnishes can do that. The worst for it is the Citadel ones, to be brutally honest. Especially the new ones, I really don't like them. Further Vallejo washes. But that's my personal preference. But like I say, you pay for what you get. There is certain companies that make already a panel line accent wash, which is essentially just what we've made here. I know Tamiya make one. I think Mr. Hobby or Sangui, I can't remember, can't pronounce the name, but they make one. Humbrol will be releasing one sometime this year. I think it's June it's coming out. Enamel panel washes in various colours. I sometimes use grey ones, I sometimes use black ones. It depends on the kind of contrast I'm after. With this being a grey model, I want high contrast, so that's why I'm going for the black. So I think you kind of get the idea now. Every time I touch this onto here, it's just going and flowing around all of the panel lines. There is this like mucky staining around. You can actually do this before you paint with pre-shading if you've got an airbrush, but I find I pre-shade as well with my airbrush before I paint the model and after it, but it's very difficult to pre-shade something this small accurately, I've found. I don't know, I just think it's a much easier way of doing it. So what we do is just go along these lines here, make sure we get it into all of the nooks and crannies. There is a lot of surface detail on this kit. Thumbs up to Tamiya on this one. It was cheap as well. I think I only paid about £5 for it, which is cheap for a Tamiya kit in England. Usually they retail around about £10 to £15 for a kit this size. The 1/72 kits, Jesus, they are expensive. I think the last time I looked, the new Tamiya Zero was like £55 for a 1/72 one. Hence why, when I buy Tamiya models, I tend to buy them direct from Japan or the USA, because they're a lot cheaper. I think you're kind of getting the picture now. Sorry, it's a bit out of shot. I didn't realise it was out of shot there. Sorry about that. Been whittering away and didn't even realise I was out of shot. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so any more panel lines on this top surface? Well, there's loads of panel lines on this top surface, but any more that I can spot I can do really quickly for you guys to see? Not particularly. Just zoom out a little bit. Give me a bit more working space. There we go. Okay, I'm just going to flip this over. And we're going to do the side here. Just hold on to the drop tank. I assume it's a drop tank anyway. Just put this into here. Sorry if my head gets in the way. Okay, this is what happens when you don't gloss varnish it. Because I didn't gloss varnish this back end. And as you can see, the wash is like spider webbing all over the place, like spreading out. That's because of the matte finish of the paint. It's basically grabbing hold of these pigments or particles of paint. And when we come to clean this up, you will actually see how difficult it is to get it off. That's why it is important we use a gloss coat or a satin coat over the top. Same as for oil washes as well. If you're using an oil panel wash or an oil wash for miniatures, which I'll be probably showing you in a later video, it is very, very important to use a satin or a gloss coat over the top. Otherwise, it'll just be a nightmare to clean off. Okay, so we're just going to get it all around these pieces. As well, this is good if you're doing pre-painted models and you don't want to paint them yourself, if you're being a bit lazy. You can do this to your kits straight on top of the plastic. You don't have to worry about gloss coating it. For instance, a Gundam kit. Bandai's pre-painted Gundam kits that are moulded already in coloured plastics. This will be an ideal thing just to give you that extra bit of detail on the kit. Because I've noticed a lot of the kit, I've picked up quite a lot of the kits recently, and the detailing is just really good on the plastics. You might have to scribe a few extra panel lines here and there if you wanted to, but if you just wanted to get a good quality finish on a model that was quick and easy to do, just do this. Take you no time at all, give you a good effect when it's done. You could even use some of this as a weathering effect as well. If you mixed it up a very thin brown coat, what I've used on this is I've used AK Interactive's oil washes as well, which I've used on the surface of this model to basically give it its streaky finish. On the surface of the wings, at the back of the wings and trailing edges, there's like a streaky finish. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. I think you get the picture now of what I'm doing. And when I've got it all finished, I will then come back to you and I'll show you the cleanup process. If you could actually see the model I was painting. There we go. I can't actually see my screen, it's way up top. Okay, so you kind of get the image of what I'm doing right about now. What we'll do is I'll come back and you get to see the finished product. Okay, now our aeroplane's had enough time to dry. Now we're going to start on the cleanup. So we take our cotton wool buds. We moisten them out with a bit of enamel thinners. Rub off most of it we can. So it's just damp, it doesn't need to be wet. And then what we do, we take our model and then we just go over the surface of it gently. Against the grain, not with the grain, otherwise you'll just wipe off everything you've just done. As you can see, the enamel thinners that's on the surface that we mucked up is just coming off perfectly and just leaving the thinners in the panel lines. You see that? Look, now there's all the panel lines are all accented out ready. We'll do this side quickly. Watch. So we go like this, just gently over the surface, and it'll just pull all of the thinner, the enamel paint out of all of the detail and just leaves us with a nice crisp finish. To our model. Very quick step, but end result speaks for itself. Do this side as well. Sides of the wings there. Yep, that's one. Panel lined MiG-29. We'll have to just peel off our blue tack that I stuck over the cockpit to protect it from the gloss varnish. And there we go. See if we can zoom in on it. Looks like I go the right way with the camera, usually. Okay. Come on, focus. There we go. So that's how you quickly and simply, well, not so quickly, it takes about an hour or so for it to fully dry, but that's how you can enamel panel line all your models. Like I said before, you could use this on neat plastic models, whatever you like. You might want to go back and do a bit more clean up here and there, just to make sure you get rid of all the tide marks. But crucial thing, make sure you put a gloss coat down first. If you don't put a gloss coat down first, it makes this step incredibly difficult and the wash won't flow into all of the cracks and crevices in your model. If you want, you can go back in there and just make sure all the panel lines are clean. You could use a bit more enamel thinners if you really were insistent. But until next time, please tell me what you think of this video. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and leave comments. If you find this helpful, let me know, and I'll see what other tutorials I can teach you or do for you guys. Thanks again, and I'll put some still shots up of this model after I finish with it. Thanks a lot, guys. Out.